Hi guys, Nullarbor here.
Hey, Nullarbor.
Hello.
John Vanis here.
I think if for Nullarbor, if you could go ahead and kind of run through that, unless Nullarbor, did you hear the earlier? They were talking about their concerns about orbital strikes being interrupted in terms of a connection mechanic. But I'll have.
Yep.
I'm not sure the name of who was talking. If you wanted to go ahead and give kind of
That's John Vanis.
That's John Vanis. Yeah, John Vanis. If you want to give a quick rundown of your concerns with a kind of a FanFest like OB mechanic.
Well, I'll just start from the top. I'm sorry that we're going to go through this again, guys, because Nullarbor deserves to hear all this too. Our position is that nothing should interrupt an OB. Like if another ship rolls in, both sides, if they're fighting over space above, should be able to both connect and provide OB while they're fighting each other in space. We've done this on a couple different fights where our guys were providing fire support to the guys on the ground while we were fighting with a fleet in space above, and it was one of the most intense fights we've ever had, and we really enjoyed it. We also feel that smaller teams should have the opportunity to do a hit and run OB support type thing. We don't feel that just because the bigger fleet shows up, they shouldn't get a shot. And right now, we're actually one of the bigger fleets running around Molden Heath, providing OB and wiping out other guys attempting to provide it. And we know we're not going to be the biggest kid on the block forever. If say, goons come rolling in, they roll in on a district, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't provide OB no matter what we do, because there'll be too many ships. If they float 2 Apocalypse, which are brick fit, by the time we got done killing them, the match would be over on the ground anyway. So we don't know that that's a really good idea. We think that it's actually prone to douchebaggery the minute somebody shows up in a fast-moving interceptor or T1 attack frigate and just zips by, preventing us from shooting all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So there's a couple of points there you're talking about, both somebody just like perma-tanking a contest to the capture, and somebody speed tanking past. I mean, so the thing is, with the beacon capture, it's a really small radius. You have to be within 10 Ks.
We know. We do both faction warfare and orbital supports on planets. We're very familiar.
Yeah, and you have to be connected. So it's not.
That's right. But if one ship is connected while the rest are firing on the interfering ship, that ship that's connected should still be able to provide an OB.
Yeah, so that's something that we can talk about. What it does at the moment is, if there's anybody from either side, it will halt the capture wherever it is, and then as soon as one side exclusively controls it, then it continues in that direction along.
We see that as problematic. Does this happen? What happens when a pirate flies in, who has nothing to do with either side?
Yeah, he does nothing. It's not a proximity thing. You actually have to connect, and so that means you have to have an affiliation with one of the teams on the ground, and that goes for PC and for faction warfare. So that at least means that you can't just have random people. They can come in and ECM jam you, or they can come and blow you up, but this is the risk that you take when you go into low sec and EVE. I disagree that a random drive-by should be possible, because one of the problems we have right now is that it is, EVE players are very risk averse, and it's very, if you can create a scenario where there's very low risk and for good reward, and this is something that we're looking to improve, is the reward on this as well, then they'll just do that, and then that's the optimal solution. It's super boring because it doesn't escalate into big fights. It just turns into drive-bys, like constant drive-bys. So there should be some contest for it, but I agree
We think connecting in the first place should be that, but we don't feel that either side should be prevented from connecting.
Yeah, maybe there's a middle ground there. The timing of it all is very important, because it shouldn't be super quick that you can just connect and shoot and then disappear again. So if there's a middle ground...
The way the connection speed runs right now is perfectly awesome for both sides. There is still a delay. They still have to connect. They still have to get their guy on the ground to put their fire up in the targeting, and they have to fire. So whatever the time is right now, it's perfect. It is absolutely perfect. And risk averse, yeah, they are.
What was the problem with Warpoint
orbitals anyways. Shouldn't the guys on the ground earn those orbital bombardments instead of just having somebody in the sky
That's what I
earning
was
points as they wait?
No, whoever's noise that is, please cut it.
I still don't
So
understand
there's-
that.
I can explain that. There's two reasons why we changed that. The one thing we don't like about the war points is that it becomes a I'm winning more mechanic. It rewards the side who's already doing quite well, and so this is an opportunity to have the side who's not doing quite so well come back. We're still going to keep the war point mechanic for the war barge strikes, and they'll still be in public battles. They may be in planetary conquest battles. We're still discussing that at the moment. They won't be in faction warfare though. The other reason is we want to make sure the EVE players actually have some involvement in this, and that they're not just rocking up to hit F1 and then disappearing again. We actually want there to be importance.
Okay, I'm unfamiliar with
Fading it.
faction. Sorry if you were cutting out of it.
I think Mike's breaking up.
Right now, the
Eve
EVE pilot side is more concerned from the faction warfare perspective. The faction warfare pilots we were working with and organizing, their biggest concern is that sitting over a district for any period of time is boring as hell because they don't really know what's going on.
That is true.
And it's
Well, they
not a
should
matter
Fair
of
point.
wanting to provide. Excuse me, I was talking. It's not a matter of not wanting to provide help for their friends. They'll do that because they're socially connected to those people. The problem is they're sitting there vulnerable for a long period of time, and they have no feedback other than the destruction sequence that comes back. They don't get to see what's happening. If they're like our guys, our fire support guys actually connect up with the squad through EVE Voice so we can anticipate their needs and put people on. I mean, we would like to be able to have 3 destroyers running multiple districts simultaneously over the same planet and bounce between the two. And we'd like to see other fleets do the same.
All right, now, one thing I know that we had before in at the Fan Fest is there was the that overview. That I know that what I've heard from talking with Nullarbor is there's some problems. The problem is that was more designed for a esports type of environment. But I do think I agree with you that there does need to be a kind of a feedback mechanic for the EVE pilots in terms of knowing what's going on the ground.
Yeah, status of the battle. Yep, that's on the roadmap. We're not going to fit that in at the same time that we do these changes, but that's definitely something I want to do.
Now, that being said, we do feel that since the war point mechanic is going away, some of the things that have been brought up is, well, what's the cycle time between dropping steel rain on a planet? And that's something we have concerns about, because what we don't want to do is be waiting 2 minutes at a time for each firing, because we think that's unrealistic when some of our guys earn war points pretty damn fast. And at the same time, we don't want it to be so fast, like I made comments about 15 to 30 seconds, that it's so fast, and somebody actually changed my mind a little bit, that it's so fast that it just makes the game unplayable for an opposing side, because they just get rained on all day long. On the flip side, that would cause a lot of people to start talking to their EVE side a lot more, and vice versa.
Yep. So one thing is that friendly fire will be on in faction war, which was going to be interesting now. And you'll get kicked from faction warfare if you apply too much friendly fire damage. But so on that question, then what time do you guys think is a good time between orbital strikes for an individual team?
A minute. Something.
Or per ship.
Well, we can't do per ship because you'll bring 200 ships and have 200 orbitals, and that's not
Exactly.
cool. But
Just one.
yeah.
Or 2. Maybe 2. But I'm thinking a minute.
What if I want 3 destroyers connected that each have a different turret type? Can one of those fire when they request? Can all 3 connect so that I can provide the OB requested?
They can all connect and they'll look at the targets, and then you can just decide who fires.
Okay, that's great. But what's a healthy medium for cycles between OBs in terms of time?
Well, so it's a tricky question because what if the district is completely uncontested, where you don't have anybody coming along and fighting for it? What's the minimum? Like, so how many would we be happy with in between, without it just becoming one guy in a destroyer ruins a battle for 32 other players? So that's sort of where we're looking at how often the current orbital strikes get called, how often they're earned, and how often the Eve ones are being called, and how much damage they're doing. We're kind of crunching all the numbers on that. It's going to be more than 30 seconds.
Obviously.
Will it be more than 1 minute, you think? Ballpark.
Probably, yeah.
That's a lot of time on a district for an opposing force that's going to have to hide from us when we have force recons out.
I kind of agree with the situation of, I mean, it creates more communication between Eve and Dust side when it comes to not having to just wait for a certain limit, I guess. If we're talking about actually giving a time frame to when steel rank can be dropped, I think it actually it creates a better situation, or like understanding of, like, I guess, war experience of, like, you know, if there's an actual air force dominant, it creates, I mean, it should be a reasonable thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, they may lose that match because they got bombed to hell, which is a reasonable overmatch. And then the next match, they're going to definitely be calling on some Eve pilots.
And that's not a bad thing, too. That's a great thing. It's like, okay, well, we're really going to put the two games. It's like, it's literally like, you know, blitzkrieging the crap out of somebody, and it's because they don't have enough resources to do what they need to do. I mean, it really puts a full a full understanding of war to a video game instead of just being, you know, person to person. It's literally like, okay, we got an air force now. We got rain coming down on you. Like, we can drop entire strikes on you and level the area. It makes a real kind of feel towards war. Like, that's just all I wanted to say.
Capability will cause more of a conversation between the two groups than any forced capture mechanic.
Well, I got a question. Is there a way that you could get capsulators into a team chat?
Yeah, we do it all the time.
We'll be doing that with this update as well, and when you connect, we'll put you into the team chat and on Team Voice.
That is perfect, because
we actually create a separate channel altogether, so we're already in that. So we're communicating when we're in the same system.
Yeah, I expect there will be groups that continue to do that with, you know, particularly alliances and PC.
So you could just sneak into one of those channels and mess
So just make sure if you're already connected to a channel, it doesn't automatically jam you into team chat when you connect, because that would not be fun.
Well, team chat itself is one thing, like voice comms, but the actual team chat will, once you connect to the district, will the team chat pop up for you so that you can type to these people as well?
It won't matter if you type to them because they're not going to see it.
Yeah, I'm talking voice chat.
Yeah,
Like,
but
not
not everybody joins team chat in faction warfare. And so...
Yeah, but it won't matter if they join team chat or not. If you type to them, they're not going to see it.
There are people who check team chat, especially before the match starts during War Barge. Yeah, of course.
But you're not connected.
Most people do not check chats at all during the good firefight.
Yeah. If they're checking team chat before the war barge ends, I can assure you the pilot's not connected because he doesn't even know what.
When faction warfare starts becoming more relevant, I guarantee you're going to start to see people use team chat more to coordinate with people that are not within their teams to try to get more people on the board. You got to understand that team chat is going to be essential when you're going into a faction warfare match and you're not a full team, especially if they up the numbers.
I'm saying if you're relying
militia chat.
Yeah, if you like, the thing is, if you're relying on random people to show up and help you out, that's going to be such a minute number compared to people who actually organize it. For it to be successful, you're going to have people organizing.
But at the same time, though, I think it's important to make sure you need to have options available for people maybe who aren't necessarily as organized as one group or the other. So,
well, if they're not as organized, they need to suffer a little bit. That's part of being organized.
Well, yeah.
No, that's we shouldn't be removing tools because they're not organized. You know, if we can easily provide them some accessibility. This is not an organization thing. This is just having the tools available.
I'm not against tools. I'm just making sure that statement is like you don't make corrections for people who don't organize.
Well, but
Making
having
tools is
them
fine.
be able to open up that text chat if they connect to the district would be something that could be implemented, hopefully, because that would help people just trying to go and help randoms on their faction work. Because you can be part of a militia and not be a part of an organized group and go and help people in faction warfare and go connect to districts. And
Then put them in militia chat, because that's what that's for.
I would assume
Um,
that the team chat is what it's for. Whatever.
So, so Nullarbor, are you when you say these encapsulators are connecting to this, are you thinking this of just a text thing, or are you thinking of this in terms of a voice type connection?
No, it'll be like a normal chat channel. When you jump into system, you get local. When you connect to a planet, you'll get a district channel, and that has both text and voice, and it will be of the team of the Dust battle that's currently going on the ground. And the team chat in Dust shows you the capsuleers who are connected, and you can voice and text to all of them.
Perfect. That's what I wanted. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
citing
that
as
is
an
good.
issue.
It's only while you're connected though, so there'll still be channels that are organizing Dust OB in Amar faction warfare, and but it'll just
For
help
instance,
make sure organize.
we
You know
run-
who's on the ground, and you can see who's in the battle. Like that's one of the big things. You connect to a district, you don't even know who's on the ground below. You don't even know who.
Yeah.
Would it
That makes-
be like a fleet chat?
Yeah, it's gonna work like.
All right. One of my members mentioned a question that I wanted to bring up, and I thought it was actually a pretty good question. If a destroyer sits on the timer and just builds up time on the timer, can they build up OB support? So they can they build up successive rounds of dropping? So if they sit there for a while, and then their friends call down 3, and they've built up enough time to drop 3, can they do that all at once?
Actually, no, it does one at a time. That's something we could debate, but yeah, it'll cap one. But it's also for the team, and it doesn't go down. Even have tanky ship that
You're breaking
again?
up, bud.
Yeah.
they can
You're
cap it,
underwater.
swap that out, big ship.
What?
Nullarbor,
You guys are breaking up.
comms are coming in broken.
Yeah. I didn't get you to that.
All right, sorry, let me try that again. Is it okay?
Yeah,
Yep,
you're
that's
good.
clear.
Yeah, okay. So the way I'll just explain the capture mechanic. You have to have a ship connected for a set period of time, with nobody on the other team connected at the same time. And once it hits the captured state, it will stay like that, and there's a orbital strike available for that team. Now anyone
And then
can
when
provide that strike, and it doesn't go away if you disconnect. So you can have that person fly away and another ship come in, and you could swap out a tank ship with an orbital strike ship, and then they can provide the orbital strike for the team. If another team, if the other side comes along and captures it, they will start uncapturing it and then swing it back around for their side, same as a faction warfare flex.
We don't like it. That's a plex. OB shouldn't be like a plex. Like I said, we said
It doesn't bother
both
me
sides
at
should
all.
fire.
Well, what we're hoping is that this creates a
Kane,
real contest, because if
how
there
many
was
fleet
two
fights have
sides
you
and they
fought?
both got OBs, then they could just sit in tanked ships next to each other, not shooting each other. And I think that's
They could.
Yeah, that mechanic doesn't bother me at all. It allows for people to contest the area, and I think that that's a good way.
If they want to contest the area, they can do it with an actual fleet and shoot at each other. We think that that's actually realistic.
Yeah, well, that's another way
Because-
of doing it too, because you have to maintain control of a tiny area of space, so you can just like jam them or bump them out even, and you can, there's a lot of ways you can interfere with them. But
And plus,
I
both
don't
sides being
think
able
that.
to fire at the same time is great. It's been some of the most intense fleet fights we've ever fought. We're keeping the destroyer alive while fighting like mad over the district, while that destroyer is still trying to stay in place to destroy that, to drop OB. That is intense. Because if another fleet flies in, what's the point of the destroyer even staying on district? There isn't.
Well, I would say, part of the thing is you want to have you want to incentivize. You want this thing to be incentivizing enough for people to be bringing multiple ships. And
that's what we do. We're the ones actually doing this, guys. I mean, like, we are the ones actually doing this. We haven't seen hardly any other fleets show up.
No, don't act like you represent all players, please.
But we don't. We don't. But
yeah, I have a hard time getting my guys
flying
to do
around.
anything.
But see, the part of the problem is been the fact that when you get an OB strike has always been determined by the performance of the battle on the ground, not by how you are doing in Eve. So what this mechanic is doing is it's focusing more on you and Eve performing well and clearing the field.
That's right. And think about the time pressure that's on you if you're not clearing the field fast enough and OBs are still dropping.
I'm still concerned about the lack of incentive that it is for anybody to show up for PC or faction warfare. I mean, LP is one thing, but that's still, for most EVE pilots, not enough.
I'll talk about incentive just quickly. We will give LP, where we've been talking about making it similar to sort of flexing levels of earning. It might be more, it might be less. That's still being discussed. We're also going to do kill mails, and we know EVE players love kill mails.
We love kill mails.
Yeah. For PC, the incentive is to help your alliance. That's something we'll run on later on. For faction
and that's why we've got a 95% request ratio to actual success ratio for fleets in the sky. When our guys ask for support on the ground, we give it to them. No, we're at 95% giving it to them. If you want to see it at 50%, here's what you do. You actually provide an incentive for EVE pilots to control that, to help their guys on the ground control the ground and help it EVE pilots. I mean, the fuel thing is a great bonus. The benefit to manufacturing speed, not so much. The benefit to, if it increased manufacturing
but it's stuffed in the corner of molten
prediction rate.
Like, I don't give a damn about that area.
I'm gonna cut you off here. This is a huge discussion. We're way past. Yes, we've talked about exactly what you've talked about. We've got plans that go way beyond that already. So this is a discussion for another day. PC 2.0 is coming later. But specifically the OB, incentivizing, absolutely. I still want to.
It should be like PvP.
Yeah, the actual rates, we're talking. Yeah, with the actual rates, we're talking with the EVE teams who do LP payouts for faction war. So we'll come up with something that's comparable. So as a time and faction.
Okay.
You're still breaking up really bad, dude.
Yeah. I don't hear you anymore.
Thing I'll bring up with the team though. What we could do for contesting is, at the moment, it's if there's a single contest, then it stops capturing. We could do it based on a numbers game. So if you had 2 pilots versus 1 pilot, then you've got 1 point towards
then goons
capturing.
Show up and nobody can do a damn thing about it.
Well, if goons are all in, if the goons are in faction warfare, and they all want to pile onto one district and prevent you from getting OBs, then they should be able to do that. That's they're winning the space game at that point.
We think they should be able to do that by shooting the ships out of the sky above it.
They can do both.
Yeah, you can do both.
It doesn't really
but why have to do both? Why not just have control because they actually have physical control of the space above the district?
Well, that's kind of
you're introducing extra mechanics that can cause more lag than it's worth.
I don't think so. I think the contesting of a district's beacon is perfectly fine, especially when it comes to bringing more. Now, I like the idea of having more ships to be able to contest it. So 1v1, there's no way they can contest it. But if they bring 2 ships onto the field and start contesting that beacon, then that's when it starts flipping over into their favor.
Doesn't that ruin the idea of having like these guys that just jump in, do orbital, and run?
Well, that's
what happens to the smaller guys that can't actually get to the other 100 players because they don't have 100 players that are EVE pilots in their alliance.
That is true.
Wait,
You're-
talking about the
you're
ones that
Well,
totally
the
making
thing with
talking
faction
guys
warfare.
simple.
Yeah, let's talk about faction warfare specifically, because there's quite a lot of faction war battles running currently. We're going to work on making that more accessible as to where they are. So, with the numbers of people who are currently flying around in faction warfare right now, I don't see this being a big problem that you get these enormous pylons. And even in the cases where they do, then that's awesome. We've got some great fleet battle above
But
the
those
planet.
pylons
And they'll
won't turn
probably not care.
naturally.
Yeah, and that's right. They probably won't even care about the orbital at that point. They'll just care about some big 40 on 40 man space battle, which is fine. That's more important at that point than the orbital strike.
Well, then the real question comes into play that. Sorry, I don't want to talk over anybody else.
Okay. This is Rabbit. What if the situation, instead of it being like more of a disorganized clutter, for basically the Eve pilots being in the space over the actual planet that's being attacked, what if it was how you said in the window time frame of like the 2 to 5 minute window, but for every player that's in there, they get at least one orbital strike. That way it kind of cycles it out, and then that's it. Would that be a viable situation instead of it being like whoever gets to it first could launch the strikes? But wouldn't it be better just each pilot that's in there gets a certain number of orbitals that they can drop, and that's it, and then that's it for the game, for that match?
Well, that's determined by the amount of ammunition the pilot carries.
Yeah, but I mean,
But I think if every pilot can bombard, you just land like 40 destroyers on the grid, and that's gonna just be ridiculous.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a
have a
destroyer.
limit. I mean, it doesn't have to
Right.
be like every single dude. You could set it at a limit. Maybe up to 4 pilots can actually hit the actual planet within that time window, and have a set number, a finite number of times that they can drop orbitals and leave it in that
Say
window.
something about the environment.
Yeah,
I'm not a fan of that because we typically have a dedicated fire support guy while the rest of the fleet's covering him.
Well, I mean, I don't really know too much about that aspect, but I'm just talking about an aspect of how it would make the Eve players feel more like they're doing something instead of just pressing a button and that's that. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually the communication. There's strikes involved. It's more involved. It's not really involved in terms of me being just my experience in PC and in factional. Just, you know, the Eve player goes through a lot of trouble just to get to that district. They might get shot at and all types of, you know, whatever it could be in that airspace, and then they got to press a button. They have to wait for us to get a certain number of points for them to press a button. And to me, it's just like, you know, they go through all the trouble just to do something, just to press a button. It's like, instead, you know, give them a certain number, let them get into the airspace, control that airspace, drop a finite number of orbitals, and then that sets it for the match.
So, like having your cooldown timer, like on their orbital. So, for example, if they drop the orbital, they get like a 5-minute cooldown timer to where they cannot drop another orbital. I think that's what they were talking about.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
just in case I missed anything, just, you know, just to
I
make it
think
more
5
involved.
minutes seems an awful long time.
I was just saying 5 minutes out of the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah,
It'll be less than 5 and more than 30 seconds, but exactly where and
I mean, if we could go into specifics,
to be honest,
you could rate it down to
something
the actual
launch.
power of the weapon itself that's being, you know, distributed. You can set a timer based off of
Well,
the actual weapon. If it's a pro weapon, set a longer timer. If it's, you know,
That's what I wanted
tell
to
you
talk about.
Our standard battleship.
Nullarbor wanted to
our
make one more
standard-
comment about that. Jack,
Go ahead.
one sec. Nullarbor wanted to make a comment about the timing for it. I think Nullarbor, you were starting.
Yeah,
to
just
understand.
we will tweak this once we launch it. You know, we have very good data on how often this happens and what fights happen afterwards. So, you know, we'll launch with something, and don't freak out if it's not quite right, because we'll probably change it if it's not encouraging the fights, or it means you're not getting enough orbitals during a battle. Because it's going to be an interesting balance between giving it enough cycle time so that, you know, it's fun and exciting and encourages these fights, but it's not overpowered on the ground.
And in terms to, you know, if it's unfair for the other side, just in personal opinion, I mean, that is what worries. If you don't have the resources, then that's your ass, pretty much. I mean, if you need to make those connections. If you lose because you got more guys in space, then that's your problem personally. I mean,
well, but you gotta remember too.
Sandbox field. That's why I agree with it more of a sandbox field. If somebody beats me based off the fact that they have better gear and they've been in the game longer and they're doing the work putting in to get to that point to do that and rape as much as possible, then that's a privilege that they get.
That's exactly where I was going.
If we pull in, like, you know, Vanis and all y'all come in Eve space and we're in a PC or a factional, we should have that liberty to completely bomb and rape, and the same vice versa. If they got stronger people, then that's the privilege that comes with the war aspect, just like it is in real life.
Well,
situations.
you gotta,
The stronger team
so,
wins.
like, in real life situation, what you have is a smaller, like, more elite unit that's better trained will call in an airstrike, and the CAS, the close air support, does not stay in the air that long. So, like, you need to have that ability to swoop in, drop it, and leave, drop the asset and leave. You can't have it where, you know,
Well, you
we
can correlate
like,
this to the timers of an
what you
extended
want.
window
Yeah,
of
but
waiting
this is
out
a-
north.
Yeah.
This
That's
is a
all-
game,
But what you
guys.
want. No,
It
right,
needs
right,
to
that's
be
what
fun
we're saying, but
mechanic.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
it
that's
is.
the fun part. That's the fun part. Is the fact that
It
a
has-
smaller, more precise and players that aren't as like negligent, not watching the radar, won't be able to stop a fast moving airplane or a spaceship that comes in and drops an airstrike. If you have to sit there and try to like control a region because you have more ships, that doesn't seem to me like the right thing. Why don't they just physically try to
No,
stop the ship that tries to come in?
I think you're misconstruing what I'm saying. Basically, what I'm saying.
No,
is,
but no, that's what the mechanic is saying. More ships that have in space, that means they actually are the only ones that are able to drop the airstrike. So if there's like 100 ships in space in E, and you come in with 5 ships, the ones with 5 ships will never take control of space, which means they will never be able to drop an airstrike.
Well,
Which
let
means we
me
won't even
let me
bother
stop.
showing up.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Okay, guys, we're talking all about Eve pilots and their ability to drop orbitals, but we're not talking as much about the fact that the dust guys on the ground are going to not be able to control this type of stuff. So, for example, if you have an organization that's going in and spending, like you said, putting down their proto suits and putting their best, and they get an organized effort, they should be able to earn those warbarge orbitals, at least one per squad for the match, because they're putting in the effort and the time, and the people on Eve side might not be able to hold any type of air superiority, which doesn't benefit the people on the ground. If they can't bring air superiority, how come they're suffering when they're not able to drop the orbitals?
See,
Because the guys
Well,
who
if they're
do
already
bring the
doing well.
orbitals should have the advantage.
Well,
Exactly.
that's another thing. But that's
For-
another
for
thing,
me-
though, is that we should make the orbital strike from a starship provide a better alternative than a warbarge. Because right now, yes, they do different things. Some do more damage than are tighter packed. Some do this, some do that. But the fact of the matter is there isn't that big of a difference between a warbarge orbital and a orbital strike from Eve side.
I thought we're getting rid of all the warbarge precision strikes in general. I mean, that's what we need to do anyway.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so that's not even, so that's a moot point that we're bringing up right now.
Well, no. The idea is what I'm trying to say is that those orbitals shouldn't be taken away from the people that are working for those orbitals on the ground.
well,
In my personal opinion.
Well, then it doesn't buff the connection between the game. Everything stays the same.
so
Exactly.
the issue there is
We want to encourage Destiny players to have to work together. We want to make it so
Yeah.
they have to work together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's part of the social interaction.
All right.
Wouldn't you want
Check
just
for a
Uni
second,
to work
guys. Check
well
for a
with
second.
Eve Uni?
Somebody was going to say. That's not the question here. The more of the question is what's going to work best for people in faction warfare that are earning these orbitals, that go in there and spend the time, spend the money, and and have the experience when they don't have the Eve support.
I would
That's
recommend
why-
something
that's
up
where
with
diplomats
the Eve
come in,
Alliance
right?
that does that.
But that same
So I would say
correlation
part
goes
of that
to an
because
aspect.
every single time I go into a FW, I've never seen a Starship Strike pop up for me, and I've been in, give or take, 500 FWs since
Who's this?
Uprising started. This is Godin.
Godin, talk to me after
Yeah.
this. I will link you up with any number of faction warfare alliances and corporations that would love to talk to you and would love to help you.
That's
I don't
great.
care
So-
if it's even on the opposing side. I will square you away.
Yeah, I just stuffed
So-
an alt in the Caldari North.
Yeah, I mean, I hear everything
Now,
that's
what if-
being said about the factional front, but this is going to actually correlate into PC dust side. So it's like we've dealt with the problems before, and this is all kind of synonymous. It's factional and it's PC as well, but it's all synonymous into the fact of what can bring more Eve, dust interaction, and it's like it's very detached right now. And I mean, the premise is to get it. I mean, I'm in favor of I mean, all of us have done it. If we play Dust Side, you know what proto stomping is. We would go into a match, we put on proto suits. Odds are somebody's not going to be able to cope with that. And them having to work together is on their problem. The same reason how I found this corp in the beginning to just even, you know, be picked up by it is the fact of survival. You have to find a way to adjust and work with other people. If it's outweighed on the other person's side, then that is just their problem. That goes with the sandbox. This is a game that's created by the actual players. Power is from the actual players. So it's literally a standpoint of you either get with somebody strong or you're fishing a tank full of sharks. You know what I mean? And
I just don't think the problem. Yeah, I just don't think the problem is being able to drop orbitals. I think the problem is the incentive for EVE players to actually come to the battle and do that for people. Yes, there are EVE players that currently go out there because they want to have fun and they want to drop orbitals on people, but there's just not enough. And even with the LP, I just don't see it being viable, especially within Planetary Conquest.
That was my
Now for planetary, well, now LP is a faction warfare specific thing. Now, honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing in Planetary Conquest the ability to provide orbitals actually be opened up beyond the corporation and alliance relationship. Because, you know, the fact of the matter is, I mean, it makes sense in faction warfare because you have a very large pool of players that you can pull from. For, you know, you have all of the militia players that you can do for, and then, you know, as going forward, hopefully we can get more tools that increase the visibility of those fights. So it's easy for basically, and you know, if you have the LP incentive, pilots will go over there and, you know, do those OBs, whether or not they're specifically organized or not. Now on the PC side of things, you know, you're talking about one region of space, and you're talking about a very kind of closed-in system and a very limited number of pilots because of the limitation of the corporation and alliance relationship. Personally, if somebody wants to help somebody out on a, you know, whether it's on a whim or they want to organize and say, hey, you people from this group, I want you to help us do these orbitals, I think that's something that should be possible. I don't think there's a reason to constrict the mechanic when it can be something that's more open in terms of Planetary Conquest side of the equation.
Yeah, and that's something we've talked about. We'll probably end up chasing something like that. That creates a few problems with spying and like just access restrictions and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of UI, but we'll review
spying.
that exact. Yeah, we love spies as well, but then you need to be able to do it. But we'll review that. That's probably, it's not going to be for this upcoming OB changes, but I agree with Kane. It would be much better to be able to open this up to people who aren't within your alliance but are friendly to you. In terms of incentivizing PC, we want to just make PC more relevant for EVE players, not giving them any kind of like special treats or rewards. Just, you know, that's just part of your job being part of the alliance. So
we do it. That's exactly how our culture and our alliance is. And that's exactly
and that we want that with more. Basically, you know, you guys are a niche area. I think we want
what we're finding when we talk to corporations that are not in alliances, that don't really get the social interaction and the politics that are actually occurring in the bigger New Eden kind of thing, is that the first thing out of their mouth sometimes is, "Well, how much are you going to pay us?" We're like, "What?" Pay you. And we're like, "I think you've been fed that mercenary diet a little too much." And we, you know, create some videos, some great press and stuff if you can. On the CCP side, it talks about how you're part of a bigger team. That might actually make a bigger impact on some of that. Because the mentality of a lot of the guys on the ground is, how much are you going to pay me? How much are you going to pay me? And they provide nothing for us in space, so why in the hell would we pay them? You know, it's just one of those things. But for those who get it, they really get a benefit from it.
There should definitely
Just
be
a question
incentives for EVE players, though, because of the risk that they take by actually going into an orbital situation. These guys got.
I agree with that.
Billions of dollars of equipment that they have ISK-wise, and I'm not too familiar with EVE, but I do know that it's hell of expensive versus my $47,000 ISK drop suit. You know what I mean? So I just personally feel that EVE side should get a lot of incentive just so it can bring them more over to factional warfare. It's definitely.
Faction warfare is not going to be a problem. The LP rewards are going to be interesting, but the real thing is just going to be the fights. People want kill mails, people want good engagements. I think this should hopefully stir up a bit of off-gate engagements, which is something we'd like to see more of, Plex-style, engagements. These will be more risky than the Plexes because they're not gated and, you don't have the safety of being behind the,
Precisely.
off the wall pinpoint from gates. So they will be riskier, but, they should be interesting at least.
PC will get kill mails too?
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
God.
A question that's regarding something more Eve side is the fact that will we ever see skills implemented into the game that might affect orbital bombardments, whether it be rate of fire damage or AoE?
Yep, good question.
That's awesome.
One skill we discussed the other day was actually one that reduces the capture time. If we're doing some kind of capture mechanic. We're not going to have any skills in this round, but skills and how other modules on the ship or how specific ships might affect the OP come up constantly, and that's going to happen at some point.
I would see something that would affect your firing cycle being more advantageous in terms of people's real interest.
Yeah, possibly mods or ship mods that affect the OB in some way, shape, or form, or even affect the timer that it takes for you to be able to drop an OB, making it faster as long as you're connected to the beacon.
Two things. One, will there be a special OB ships in the future, maybe? And two, will there be OB turrets, like gets extra damage for OB ammo? That would be interesting.
We've talked about doing
about
ships
something
before.
shooting from the planet?
No, I'm talking about specific OB turrets and ships.
Yeah, from the Eve side. We've talked about designated orbital bombardment ships, but we're not ready for that yet. We need to make sure the mechanic is more widespread first before we invest doing a ship in it.
If you did that, what would be the point of the special ammo that's already a pretty successful mechanic as well?
Yeah, well,
question about the
ammo types.
You could have a ship which gets a bonus. You could have a ship which gets a roll bonus to orbital strikes.
You could create a command ship module that would do that just as effectively, probably.
I was thinking make it like a Tech 2 destroyer.
Which would fit very nicely on a war barge, I might add.
Now, something I wanted to pick y'all's brains about. Something I have heard asked about before is if now right now if you fire one gun, two guns, it varies the amount of guns to fire. I can't remember if it specifically adjusts the AoE, but I do know that one gun will fire basically one beam directly in the center of your OB strike. Would you guys be interested in maybe the number of guns kind of being more directly tied to your area of effect to kind of give you a little bit more control? Because I know someone has come up to me before is the nice thing about the war barge strike is that it's a specific size. So in terms of friendly fire issues, what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I think that's an experience issue. Because when you do the different OBs, if you've got experience, then you know the width that they're going to be.
Well, another question is that we've been talking about and we've been testing with Industrial University is if, and I'm not sure, we haven't got any kind of confirmation on this, but the amount of weapons that you use on the ship itself pertains to the amount of strikes that are actually hitting the ground. And if the strikes that are hitting the ground are have their own individual AoE, or is it just an area of effect from the center of the OP strike?
So, Nullarbor may want to take this, but each beam is its own kind of projectile that has its own explosive.
Which is why you want as many turrets as possible firing.
Yeah.
So it does.
Yes, it does matter how many turrets fire.
Well, I know how many turrets, but does each turret consist an individual strike, or is the individual strikes determined no matter what? Like, say, for example, no matter what, it's always going to strike 8 times. It all depends on the amount of weapons that you have will determine the amount of damage those strikes actually do.
Yep. It's actually the number of things that actually land. So one of the things I would do for laughs is I would have a covert ops with 1 turret. And the covert ops with 1 turret would fire literally just 1 shot in the center of that orbital strike. So you would only get 1 chunk. Like, so 1 laser comes down from the sky and that's it. Rather than having your usual, series of strikes coming from the sky. I'm hopefully thinking that answers your question.
That does.
Okay.
Hearing that has me. I just thought of another potential concern. Hypothetical scenario, Duster on the ground says, could you shoot 1 laser right here to take out this tank, but don't do something wide, otherwise I will get massive losses of
Yes, they can do that
team
now
killing.
because they can load just 1 single turret with the right type of ammo and then it will fire.
Here's the problem. That Duster gets punished if the Eve pilot decides to be an asshole and fires down 8 hybrid shots.
He sure does. That's how it works.
The Duster will get punished for all of those TKs. Is there anything?
First of all, we haven't indicated anything about those being TKs yet. But
they will be.
They will be TKs?
Yep.
So will that affect
the
status?
So who gets punished for the TK? The Eve pilot or the ground guy? Because
if you're in
faction
too
long and then drops it later, too late, and then your guys walk in and then he drops it 3 seconds later on accident, are you screwed for that? Because that would be awesome.
It's the guy who calls it, but you will get the option to whoever gets TK'd can forgive or punish.
What's going to prevent people from just putting like brand new alts into the opposing side over and over again and just TKing themselves and then starting a new alt and creating havoc on the opposing side? Because the other side can't do a thing about it. They can't shoot it, and then they get TK problems.
Yeah, we'll start a forum thread on that. We're not going to talk about that today.
Okay, because
let's try to keep this focused on just the OB mechanics.
So from an OB perspective, yes, if the Eve pilot chooses to fire all 8 turrets instead of 1, the Dust player gets punished. Yep. That's how it works, and that's how it should work. That's awesome.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to know which way the mechanic would work, as it could be either way.
Yeah, and you can have also kind of an inverse too of that. Is that someone wants to blow up a bunch of enemies, but instead your Eve pilot fires a bunch of EMP shots that does damage.
Or just fires 1 round and then says, if you want any more, you're going to have to pay him. I mean, there's all sorts of shenanigans that can occur either way. I mean, like that's kind of the joy of this. I mean, that's where social interaction and trust or lack of trust, is kind of a big key here. And that's what makes the game exciting.
So
another thing we haven't talked about, which is interesting, is if you capture a strike on the Eve side that notifies the guys on the ground, everybody in the team gets the notification. And any of the squad leaders can call it in. And the Eve pilot will see, if every squad leader calls it in, the Eve pilot gets multiple targets and they can choose 1.
That's correct. That sounds like a great idea.
Question.
Because the more coordinated teams will benefit by having a designated fire support guy.
I was wondering if we could get a tech map for Eve side. Like see what's going on the ground. So,
yeah, that'd be high.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would
if
be
they
awesome.
could see, so they could see the map that the Dust players see when they're in between clones.
Yeah.
Because
so
then that Dust player, that Eve player, could provide situational awareness to the guys on the ground. Or take his eyes off D-scan and get ripped apart while he does that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. This was what I was thinking, like, say someone gives, like, a spot, the Capsuleer could say, no, shoot it here, because that would be a better spot. Because he was just looking at the map, waiting for that strike request or something. So I was thinking.
Like, I know in the future, I think we would all love to see much more advanced and integrated ways for Eve pilots to kind of interact and see what's going on the dust side. But for right now, and I think we're kind of gonna, the mechanic we have is kind of what we have.
So is the mechanic going to be that E-pods have to capture the point then?
Yeah, I mean that's what we're working with at the moment. That it will be a Plex style capture. The exact details on how it captures is still up for debate. I will take this to the team. I'll take the feedback today about the desire that it's more than just you completely hold the field. If there's an opportunity for two teams to be fighting it out and still providing strikes, and that doesn't imbalance it or doesn't create complete drive-bys which are boring and there's lack of engagement there entirely. If we can come up with some way to make that work, then we'll see if we can do that too. But let me take that back to the team and discuss it.
As long as you make that initial connection time the same or slightly longer than it would take a small ship to lock that destroyer and point it, then you're good to go.
You also have to take into
because at that point ship arrives. That ship arrives, has to connect, and then everyone else has a chance to lock that ship while it's attempting to connect, which we did.
But at the same time, on the ground side, though, people don't instantaneously have those enough war points to have those.
The war points are out the window, though. War points are out the window.
Points don't matter.
They don't matter anymore.
What I'm saying
because
is
they're going away.
Still, I know the war points still end up with you having a somewhat of a timer in terms of earning the orbital support, whether that be however long. You don't necessarily want literally. Okay, let's take an extreme example. The match starts, and an Eve player then orbital strikes MCC in the red zone on the enemy team, and then just makes them have no start at all for their match. You have to have it balanced in such a way that the ground battle has the opportunity to play itself out.
Yeah.
I would suggest
you should
that
still
the
have.
Side gets a fleet.
No, you should still be able to win the ground battle even if the other side has complete dominance of the air. It's just going to be, you have to change the tactics up. It's going to be trickier, but it's not, it shouldn't be at that point the Eve completely decides the outcome of the battle.
Why don't you scale the timer depending on how well the teams are.
Wait.
It's going to be hard with friendly fire.
But if all sides are equal, and one side has OB support and the other does not, the side without OB support should lose.
Yeah,
correct.
Obviously, if they use it correctly, yeah.
Okay, that's the area we want to see, and that's a tough one to do because terrain changes things, tactics change things on the ground. We understand that.
It's a careful balance, and we're going to do a little bit of this by trial, and particularly the timing of the capture is something that we will be monitoring really closely to see, and we're going to see it by the outcomes. We're going to see how often it happens and how much damage is being caused.
We keep hearing this capture word. Why don't you just call it connecting? Because it's not a capture. Unless one side or the other captures. If it's a connection, both sides can attack. It sounds like it's a foregone conclusion that there's going to be a capture.
Well, it's currently a capture, but I'm going to discuss I'm going to discuss what you've raised, your concerns here today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm going to second what Jack says. I think capture is a bad word for it.
On the flip side, from a ground perspective, we've seen OBs win a pitched battle and we've seen them do next to nothing. and we're kind of curious, what from a ground perspective, are you getting enough feedback from the EVE players themselves? Because we provide feedback to our guys. We show them what the kills look like from the ship in the sky. We show them what their impact is on the maps. But how are the Dust guys seeing that outside of an Alliance-provided function right now? We think that would actually provide more incentive to converse between the two if they understood what their bigger impact was, which from our conversations with most groups that are outside of our Alliance, they really don't understand what they're doing and the impact.
You mean what faction warfare is doing?
Faction warfare, yeah, because the EVE guys, right now, for example, Galente Militia, if they need planets hit, they actually reach out to us and ask us to go do that. And we go do it. And we go do it in large, copious, violent amounts. And we know that Subdreaded has done something similar on their side for Caldari. And we're starting to see it start to formulate a little bit more because the Dust guys have realized that the war barge is going away. That act alone is already starting to make an impact. And we see that in a positive direction because we're seeing corporations talk to other groups that they didn't realize they needed to before. And we're seeing EVE groups reach out to those groups. The OB mechanic is going to be critical to that. And good fleet fights with a lot of pressure, with both sides trying to fire, is going to be a huge thing because a lot of EVE pilots love the rush.
Yeah. On the feedback thing, I'll just say watch the dev blogs next couple of weeks. Have some more on that.
Thanks a lot.
I have a question because I'm not 100% familiar with the factional warfare side of things in EVE. An individual player can join a militia, but a corporation can also join a militia. Now, if you have individual players in a corporation and they're fighting for alternative militias, does your corporation take standing hits for those guys going out and fighting for their specific militias? And at the same time, will the corporation itself take standing hits for providing orbital support for specific militias in faction warfare?
Those are really good questions. I can't remember what we did with that. I believe the Dust guys should not affect the EVE standing, the corporation standing, and their ability to stay within the militia, but I'm going to double check that now that you've asked.
It does not impact our ability to stay in the militia, I can assure you. No, it does, it currently does not.
I'm talking about the future.
Well, no. It's not going to impact it currently because you don't get standing Dust, but we're about to add them. The second part of your question, though, is a good point. They will not be affecting the militia standings, but maybe they should, and that's maybe something if I'll talk to the team as well about, if you guys have any thoughts on that.
So my corporation isn't in faction warfare. Will I be able to bombard into faction warfare matches that have my guys in?
No. EVE pilot has to be in the militia. Either the corp or the individual pilot.
Okay, but I mean, say for example, if I have an individual pilot in my corporation, he's fighting and he's in with the Caldari militia, and he goes and he does an orbital strike for a Caldari faction warfare battle, and the question would be: will that orbital strike provide a standing hit to my corporation or only to the individual pilot? So that way, if my other guy over here that's in the Minmatar militia goes out and does that, will it affect my corporation's overall standings with any specific faction if it's an individual-based pilot within my corporation?
So currently the orbital strike will not affect the standing at all, but that's something we may look at doing. If it does affect his standing, it will affect his corpse, and that's something that won't change.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, my knowledge on faction warfare mechanics are a bit rusty. That's actually an impossible situation that you described. The only way a pilot can individually sign up for the militia is by entering an NPC corp. If one player in your corporation works or is under a certain militia, everyone in your corporation is under that militia.
Yes, except for Dust players within that corporation. So yes, you can have a corporation who is enlisted, but that only applies to the Eve pilots. And if they are striking and we do affect standings, it will affect the whole corporation. So that individual standings flow onto the corporation standings in Eve.
Will that change when the standing comes for Dust?
It's a really good question, and I don't know the answer. I think I'll have to check with the guys on that.
Hopefully it doesn't, because I want to do Galante Militia. My entire court wants to do Mar.
I would suggest you change corps.
Well, the reason why I'm asking about these things is because if, say for example, if you're a corporation that's based on contracting orbital bombardments for militia contracts, you wouldn't be able to do that for multiple organizations. So you couldn't be almost on a fact of a neutral organization providing orbital supports for all factions.
No, you have to be in the militia. And the reason for that is we want you to be a flashy orange target to the other side so that they can shoot you. If you're just a neutral mercenary, then they have to take a standings hit to be shooting you in low sec.
And that's not really fair.
Flag me as suspect.
You're actually trying to play the game.
Flag me as suspect if I connect to the district.
Yeah, that seems reasonable too, is flagging that OB pilot once he's connected to the district, and that person can choose a specific side or something.
Well, what you can do is have neutral. You can have neutral fleets on the districts. They can't connect, but they can provide, support reps and shoot the other guys and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, pirate OBs Lafayette.
For the person about mercenary group, then maybe that mercenary group provides orbital support. That's one of those things personally, for me, in terms of planetary conquest, one of the reasons I would like to see it move beyond alliance and corporation relationships is so you can see stuff like that and actually have some of that interplay on both ends of it. Now, that won't take away from the fact that if a really organized group says, we are this alliance and we do the stuff on dust planets, and so we are going to provide our guys with support and all that sort of thing. But at the same time, I don't think you don't want to force players to enter into social interaction because, through specific mechanics. You want to incentivize through the actual gameplay for those players to interact. And I just think, anytime you can have those relationships,
is also the social interaction.
But at the same time, anytime you can take down barriers for those social interactions to occur and those gameplay interactions to occur, I think that's more beneficial in the long run.
See, that being said, sorry, I'll let you finish.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that being said, the idea of outside alliance or outside corporation / alliance support, for example, maybe creating a contract that will allow corporations like my own to be able to pick those contracts up and go and provide orbital support for a singular event.
Yeah, that's something we'll be looking at for planetary conquest, I think. Not for militias, not for faction warfare. That's everyone's aligned to sides there, and they know the scope of the people involved. But for planetary conquest, that makes a lot of sense that you could just have an outside third party like Mercenary Corp come in and do the orbital support or do whatever other thing that you might need in PC.
Yeah, we agree. If our opponents want to shell out cash while our guys are getting it for free, that's awesome. Or if people want to pay us to do it for them, that's great. In faction warfare, we don't think that's a good idea, though.
No, I'm talking specifically about PC. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Yeah, and we've already been talking about that. Just me and Kane actually this week. We've been discussing the idea of having random, well not random, but like outside groups be able to connect and provide orbital support. And there's a couple of challenges with that, but we're talking through those.
Sounds good.
I think we've
Cool. Well,
said a
yeah,
lot.
I think this is
We've-
good.
we've
I'm going to
chewed
go
up
now
at the end
because
of it.
it's super late. Thanks for all the feedback. This is really good. I like having these discussions. And I know Kane was making some notes, but I'll just take some of these points that you've raised here as well and take them back to the team, and we can chew on them a bit further there. And I can't make any promises on changing some of this. What we might do is put a lot of it in, but with a close eye on tracking some metrics on the stuff that you're concerned about, and we can tweak it post. But it's always good to hear concerns like that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the time. We appreciate the opportunity to provide the input, and we think it's great when we get the chance to actually make an impact. Hey, Kane, if you're
No
still
problem.
around, I'd like to talk to you privately briefly, if I could. I had a couple questions for you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and one thing, guys, just there are threads up on both the Eve side and the Dust side in relationship to this meeting. If you have a question that you didn't think got answered, or if you wanted to make a comment, that sort of thing, please go ahead and feel free to post in those threads. I know we had one person recording the meeting. I'll try and get in touch with them so we can get that recording posted. We'll also try and get the chat log, although most of this obviously has taken place via voice. So I think the voice recording will probably be a little more useful for folks. But anyways, thanks guys for coming out, and if we need to, we can always do these types of things again. So this don't think this is just a one-off thing. Some people came to me with that they had some concerns, so I wanted to go ahead and clear the air on those concerns. So that doesn't mean that this is the only time that this will happen.
All right.